Woot. Okay, so we should be live now. We're gonna give it a little bit of time for people to join or not join. I would not be surprised if people don't join because I didn't really announce it, but I am just like that, I suppose. So we'll give it a little bit. I am announcing it in the Discord. I am the worst typist. Let's see. We gotta copy the. Should be 1080p. I'm gonna get on the Facebook and announce it as well. Okay, maybe I always forget to put in the URL. There. All right. Hopefully people join. So if anybody is currently viewing right now, if you are a part of the Discord, please use the live chat Discord in there, or Discord chat, the stream chat, because this is easier for me to see than it is the YouTube chat. I can keep this up easier than the YouTube chat, so we'll just plop this up over here, and I need to reduce this to, I don't know where, maybe there. Let's see. My dog is like dying or something. She's breathing so heavy. That's not good. She's also just super old and overweight. Okay, so we'll keep that up. That's where I need that to be. All right, cool. I'll put the Discord chat down for now and that down, and I'll open up Cinema 4D and Gaia. So here's Gaia first. It's gonna be kind of slow because I'm doing a bunch of stuff. There we go. Apparently my connection's really good, so hopefully you guys can get good quality video and audio. All right, so very, very, very easy breakdown here. It's nothing going on, not too much going on here. So we'll give it a couple more minutes for people to join. And again, if you're currently watching, I see some people are. If you're currently watching, go ahead and say hi in the chat if you would like. We're also going to be breaking down a couple things inside of Gaia and Cinema 4D. So the scene that we are breaking down is the thumbnail, but I will open up the image here. This is what we're going to be breaking down, is this. For anybody who cares to know, it's a very easy and simple scene. There's not a whole lot to it. It's just trickery of the eye, essentially. There's not a whole lot going on. Everything is Gaia made except for these rock assets are obviously Megascan assets, but the landscape, the overall landscape is made in Gaia. So I am almost exclusively Gaia. Hey Tamer, glad to know things are going well. I hope everybody's surviving this COVID crap. Doing pretty well though. Hopefully there'll be a little more maybe at intermediate to advanced breakdowns of stuff here, because these assets, these Megascan assets themselves, they don't actually have this white snow powder on top of them. They come with just the basic rock material. So we're going to be using the dirt node inside of Octane to give us this snow look. We'll give it a couple more minutes. Usually, from what I've seen, live streamers usually give anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes for everybody to kick in and whatnot, but they usually announce things and I don't. I just start and I do it. So but anyways, Tamer, welcome again. If you have any questions or if you would like me to go over anything, just feel free to ask. You don't have to worry about bothering me. I do this specifically so I can answer questions and do stuff for you guys. So feel free to chime in at any time with a question. Let's put that down. All right, we'll give it until about 8 minutes, and then we'll start breaking down our Gaia scene here. And I got a lot of good questions in the Discord chat as well, which for those of you who are not a part of the Discord that might be joining, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that link to this Discord in the chat. I don't know how to keep one specific link in Discord that never expires. I always have to generate a new one. Okay, there we go. Join Discord if you haven't already. And joining the Discord is very helpful because we can use the live stream chat here, which is easier for me to manage. I actually get alerts when people are chatting in here, and I don't in the YouTube live chat, so it just makes that a little bit easier. Like I said, this is a very easy setup, so I might have to go get some water too. Hopefully you don't hear that. I'm super thirsty. I just came back from like a 3-hour fishing adventure. Rosie, shh. Quiet. All right, so let's go ahead and start breaking this down. Hopefully people will just join in and start asking questions, and if they don't, at least we'll have the breakdown. So this is it right here in its entirety. There's not a whole lot here. I just have these planes. This is the Gaia landscape, but I just did some tweaking on it. So right here is the initial displacer, and then I turned that into an object, and then I went ahead and applied a smoothing modifier to the one that I generated from here, and then I just turned that into its own object again, and this is what I was left with, is this one right here. I also applied a Octane object tag to it. I don't know if it'll let me. I had it originally, but I don't now, but you can apply the Octane object tag right here. And you go to subdivision groups and you can increase that. I think I increased it by 1, maybe 2, and then I increased the sharpness to 1. But I think you need to actually have some other form of subdivision group in there before it'll do anything. But I did it anyways. That's just something I want to get more into doing, is actually using the Octane object tag. Okay, I'm actually doing this the wrong way. I should be doing this from Gaia. So let's go into Gaia. This will be a, did it close? Closed. It's okay, I had it saved. Just recover this one. I don't ever name things a specific name until after I've created them, so hopefully this is the right one. It is. Okay, cool. Everything here is the same except I don't have the normal map, which I exported originally, but this is the recovered one. I could just load, I suppose I could just load up the saved version, but that's okay. Doesn't really matter at this point, because the only thing that changed is that normal map, so it's all good. I'm also viewing this at 4K, so it might take a minute for this to build out. I hope you guys can hear me as well. You should be able to hear me. If you're currently listening and you want to confirm that you can hear me, that would be good as well. You could probably just turn on the audio for the chat. And you want to confirm that you can hear me, that would be oh yeah, I hear it. Okay, never mind. Confirmed it myself. And I've been on a Gaia kick lately. I've been doing a lot of stuff in Gaia. Almost everything. I've essentially moved all of my workflow from World Machine. I was still using World Machine for a lot of things up until like a week ago, and I've been using Gaia forever, almost exclusively. So the only thing that I needed to move up was I needed to figure out a better texturing workflow, which I do have a pretty decent texture workflow inside of Gaia, but World Machine allowed me for I actually had a plugin, Tito's coloring and texturing, or whatever it's called, for World Machine, and I really love that plugin. So I used to export from Gaia and import into World Machine to texture with that, because it just produced really good textures very easily. Gaia does as well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm almost now 100% exclusive to Gaia and not World Machine. I still like World Machine, but that's not necessarily up there with things that I'm wanting to use now. Gaia has essentially replaced World Machine entirely. So, and then with EmberGen, I have now replaced Vue for exporting VDBs. I can make VDBs inside of EmberGen really easy. And animations as well. So there's that. I can actually export VDB animations relatively quickly out of EmberGen. So I don't have to use Vue for essentially anything now. And I figured out an easy workflow for like a distance fog inside of Octane. So don't have to use Vue for that either, and I don't have to use Photoshop. Yay, because I dislike Photoshop immensely. Yeah, I don't have to use Photoshop for anything. I used to export Z-depth passes to get my distance fog look, my aerial perspective, but don't have to do that anymore. Thank goodness. I can just do everything inside of Octane, so I've essentially have built up everything that I need to replace two programs that I've been using heavily, which is Vue and World Machine. So if you're still using Vue, God bless your soul. You have more patience than I do. And if you're still using World Machine, that's fine. World Machine is great. So I just prefer Gaia. I prefer its interface. I prefer its culture, I suppose. Its fan base. My dog is whining. Go on, go. Get. Go lay down. Go lay down. For some reason, when Snowfall's being built out, it just stops building the rest of the nodes afterwards. I don't understand why. Never used to do that, actually, but now it does. Don't know why. I think it's because it's being used as like one of those orphan nodes, essentially, using it as the height map. I had to give my dog a death stare. She just will not stop whining. Quiet. And I know she doesn't have to go outside because she just barely came in from outside. And I know she's not hungry because I just barely fed her. So, whatever. It's called Tito's Coloring and Texturing, I believe is what it's called. Tito's. T-E-T-O. Maybe I can find it. It's on Gumroad. That's where I bought it. Let's see. Switch to buying. Library. Let us see. Yeah, Tito, the texturing toolbox. That's what it's called in World Machine. But I don't ever use this anymore. It's still a very good plugin, and I don't know if it works with the newer versions of World Machine because I'm still using the extremely old version. So it very well could still be compatible, but you can make weights, splats, and textures with it, and it's fantastic. It's a great plugin. So if you're still using World Machine, I recommend downloading that and using it for texturing. It's pretty good. All right, so it looks like it's now done building. So it's a very simple landscape. Yeah, no problem. You can see here I'm using mostly snow to cover my landscape. That's because I wanted a high altitude, like Nordic feeling landscape. So that's what I wanted to make here. That's why it's called Ymir. So Ymir is essentially the giant that was born out of the fires that were dripping or melting the ice. So it's between I believe it's Niflheim and Muspelheim. I can't remember. My Norse mythology is lacking right now because I'm tired. But I would normally be able to tell you. Can't tell you now though. Someone will probably correct me though. But it's essentially the giant that was created from those interworkings. The fire from one of the realms was melting the ice from the other realms, and the ice drippings, the water from the ice melting, is what created Ymir. Something like that. Somewhere along those lines. And this point right here is the point that you're seeing in the distance in that image. So, all right, so yeah, as you can see here, it's just snow covering most of the landscape and this rock that's sticking out. But let's go ahead and break it down real quick. So I'm using range, and the reason why I'm using range is we get all these really cool mountain peaks and slopes, so you can have a lot of interconnecting mountain pieces. It also gives you these interesting taluses, which we have to kind of work with a little bit to make them look not so gross, but you get some cool looking taluses with that. Also some folding and stretching in the mountains. So range is a very good choice in this case. Next, we're combining that with worse lands, and worse lands is what's supposed to help us with that weird talusing that we were getting, as well as give us a lot of open range areas. This is really cool looking. I thought this had some really interesting features, like these taluses right here. So worse lands is good. It's a node that I probably use a lot of nowadays. My workflow has changed drastically since I first started using Gaia. And all I did is I combine them. A simple blend, I believe. It's like a 50-50 blend, yeah. So all that did is it kind of helped tame some of the overall features from range a little bit. And then I threw in a fractal terrace. And this is a very, very light fractal terrace. But you can see how we got a little more terracing coming in right here. Just very light. And then shatter. And shatter is what we're using for our erosion. We don't need to have a whole bunch of erosion passes. We just need to have a broken landscape. And I'm using a higher strength in feature scale here. So this is what we're left with, is this like broken up landscape, and we don't have really harsh flow lines, and that's good because I don't want harsh flow lines in this case. I just want a nice broken up landscape that has a lot of flat areas that we can use for a good, so like for example right here I believe is in this area is where the camera's at, and we're looking off that way. Also, another thing to make note of, I'm using the height scale set to 10,000 and the scale set to 20,000. So height 10,000 meters, scale 20,000 meters. And that's increased from the default. So the scale is usually 5,000 meters and the height is 2,500 meters. So that's been increased quite a bit. And the reason for that is because inside of Octane, you have to have, if you want to have good aerial perspective or distance fog, you have to have a scene built around the size of your object. So if you have a very small object, it's going to be really hard to have a lot of fog in there and make it look right without things being blown out or being too dark. So you got to have a slightly larger landscape, and things can look pretty good with the defaults, but you have to really tame in the lighting settings, and you might not always get what you want. The next thing after that is snowfall, and of course snowfall is just in here to fill in the gaps from shatter, but also give us snow on our landscape. And you can see in these areas right here, we get snow following the natural flow lines from shatter, but it's being filled in so much that we don't have to worry about, you know, fake looking flow lines, which you can often get with really harsh erosion. I actually don't like a whole lot of erosion on my landscapes. I like it to be very subtle because you could do more work in post. Like when I say post, almost all of it's going to be in Cinema 4D, but you can do more texture trickery to get what you need rather than destroying your landscape. That's just me personally, but in some cases you do want a lot of erosion. It depends on the landscape you're making, obviously, but in this one it's just a frozen Nordic landscape, so we didn't need a whole lot of erosion. Then the texture comes in, and this is just the basic texture node. I didn't change anything. It's all left by default. I find that the defaults are pretty good for most things. I don't ever really play with them that much. I might combine multiple textures together and do some things that way, which I like to do quite often, but in this case I didn't have to really worry about it because most of the landscape's going to be covered in snow anyways, so I didn't need a very extravagant texture map. And then a rock map. The rock map is really important here because if you don't have the rock map in place, your slopes right here are going to look really stretched and funky, and they still kind of do, but when you get the coloring combined here, it doesn't look nearly as warped and stretched. And that's what the rock map helps with, and it also makes it look like there's rocks there, which is important. Kind of like a texture from a distance, makes it look a little more natural. The one thing I did have in here that not just the normal map, which was dropped, I used the curvature node as well, so it's down here, right here. And what I did with the curvature is I wanted to have just a small layer of green, very fine layer of green, just to make it look like there's plants growing on the rocks. Not that you can really tell in like the final image anyways, so it doesn't actually really matter, but we'll go ahead and do that again. And what I did actually is I did it based on slope. My dog is still whining and she needs to stop. I get when that's like chalkboard scratch noise that dogs can make comes in, I lose my mind. And she knows it too, because every time she does it, she looks right at me like she knows it. Okay, so to get the slopes, these steeper slopes, we just have to increase the max and the minimum to pretty high levels here. We don't want to do completely 90 degrees. We want to leave a little off of that. It can if you want. I mean, it doesn't necessarily hurt. You just end up getting weird looking artifacts, but and not enough non-selections on the slopes. So anywhere between like 75 and 80 is usually pretty good in this case. We do have a lot of really stark slopes here, so we could probably go a little higher and then just decrease the fall off. So we'll go to 85. And then let's decrease the fall off to like 2. We don't want it to be, we want it to be kind of blurred on the edges, which is what the fall off will help us with. There we go, and you can kind of see we have these darker areas are going to be selected when we increase this. There we go. We just gotta keep increasing it until we get more of a slope selection. I guess the dark areas won't be selected, but we're going to be selecting a lot less of the mountains. Okay, we're going to increase this to 80, and then we're going to call it good. There we go. All right, and then we have our curvature. So our curvature selection is going to be based on that slope. We don't need to have a whole lot going on here. We could also, you don't have to use like a sat map here for grass or something green like what I did. You could totally use a quick color. Oh, I am the worst typist. God dang it. And you can use white and black, and then you can have this as a snow selection. Instead, it might not look good right now. We'll have to maybe play with it a bit. Like that. And then we'll, I think we want to use the curvature selection there. Yeah, and then let's go ahead and change this to screen. And increase that all the way to 100. There we go. And now we have like this fine dusting of snow powder on the edges of our rock based on the slope. So I mean, you can do a lot of stuff. You don't have to just do the green. You can do white, and then you can just do a powder of snow like that. Change the curvature here to maybe be a little more powerful. I'm about ready to kick that dog out of that room. She's saying it's bedtime because we've changed our bedtime schedule so often, and she goes to sleep when we go to sleep, so probably what's going on. And then we can do vertical rather than horizontal, and if we do vertical, well, you'll see what happens. It's going to select the more vertical areas like that. Let's do maybe 30% there. Snow will most likely land on the horizontal areas, but when the camera's so far away, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to really see so much of it anyways, but it's there just in case. Okay, so that's the landscape essentially. Very simple, not a whole lot to it, and I made sure that this peak right here was at the north end. You can see north is that way, so this is the north end, because I wanted my camera to be somewhere like in this area, in this flatter area, which is about where we had it almost. I think we had it like in this area right here. That way we're looking up at that peak. And then for the exports, I exported it out at 4096, and I used proportional. And for the files, let's just, I exported snowfall. That one will give us our final height that we want. So mark that for export. and I exported it out as just a TIFF right here. And then I exported out the mixture, which in this case would be this one because it's our last one in the line. And I also made a normal map. And you can, if you're following along or you're trying to build at the same time, just go ahead and add whatever you want. But at this point, you should probably know how to export stuff out of Gaia anyways. But the important part is exporting your snowfall, which will include your snowfall map, like your snow map, which is important to have for texturing inside of Octane, and exporting it out for whatever it is your program will accept. So in this case, I did a TIFF, and I set it to proportional. That way, when I go into Cinema 4D, I can scale it proportionally because I know the dimensions here. Okay, so let's drop that down. And this is what we have. So I'm going to turn a lot of this off. Just let it do its thing. There we go. We're also going to turn this volume off. This is the main camera. That one was helping me figure out where I need to do placements, so I can get rid of that one. This was the original shot right there, but I didn't like that. I like that one more. And the difference between this one and this one, you can see one's further away, one's closer. So we're going to delete that one. And then I like having all these in such a way that makes sense. All my volumetrics and atmospherics should be together like that, and all my objects should be together. So everything that is not an object and atmospherics goes at the top. So my camera and my atmospherics at the top there, and then my objects below that. Okay, so I'm gonna turn those off, and this is what we had originally. The plane's gonna be way down there, so let's make sure that my camera isn't going to be screwed up here. Let's turn that back on. Okay, good. All right. There we go. All right. So that's the landscape, the original landscape. Oops, the original. Dang it. The original landscape right here. And you might think it looks a little different, and that's because it is. I intentionally did something to it. So what I did is I made it here originally, and the displacer settings are as follows. I turned, oh, I don't have tiling off. Interesting. Or maybe I did. Yeah, I had it off. Okay. I was confusing myself there. Okay, so tiling is off because I don't want these borders right here. These borders are annoying. They cast shadows that you don't want. So you turn tiling off, and then it doesn't do that because these are non-tiling landscapes, so it doesn't matter. And then for the height, it's in meters and for Octane, and we already know that the landscape in Gaia was 10,000 meters high, so I set the height to 10,000 meters here, and it scaled it proportionally because I exported out for a proportional export. And then the plane is set to 20,000 meters in the width and the height because that's what we had it set to in Gaia as well. The width segments are 1,000, and that's because I just needed to have a lot of segments to do a good displacement. Then I just add my displacer. So let's turn that off, and let's turn this on. So here is my landscape with smoothing. So if I were to take the smoothing out, see how, just slightly, it's not very much, but it's just a smoothing modifier. Let's go ahead and add that back. See that just smooths out some of those harsher peaks that we don't want. And the way I got that is I just increased the stiffness. So if you decrease the stiffness, you get a lot more smoothing. and we didn't want that in this case because that's way too much smoothing. But I wanted just a little bit, because if you look over here, we have some harsh peaks, as right here too. And I find that using this smoothing modifier and the peaks over here as well is a lot easier than going in with a brush and manually fixing everything. So you can, I just did 95%, but I also played around with 90. 90 worked pretty well. It looked all right, but we are getting a lot more smoothing here than what I wanted. So I just went back to 95, and that's a very small, minor smooth. And then I just right-clicked this, did current state to object, and then I ended up with my final landscape right here, which is what we're using. All right, simple enough. So let's continue. The next thing is I just I worked my way up to my lighting. My lighting was the last thing that I worked on. So I imported these rocks from the Bridge app. So we'll let it load here. We'll see if I can find which ones I used again. All right. So I used the Icelandic lava spire, and I exported the 8K maps for this. And the next one was this one, Icelandic jagged rock assembly. I exported that one. Those are the only two rocks that we're using. So here's the rock assembly right here. Let's see if I can. We gotta turn it on. Oops. There we go. And there's the rock assembly, and it's just kind of laid into the landscape like this. And it looks all right doing that. You don't have to worry about it. I don't worry too much about this stuff poking out because it can't be seen by the camera actually, because it's way behind. But this just kind of cuts off areas that I don't want to be in view, and it just kind of draws you into the middle a little bit with the way it kind of tilts into it. And then this has a very specific material. So here's the material. I am using the materials that it comes with, so it has its own maps here that you get from the Bridge app. But what I also used is the albedo map with an RGB spectrum set to white, and then a dirt map. And this dirt map is what creates the snow on top of the object. So let's go ahead and start this up. And just so you can easily see it, I'm going to disable the volumes that we have going on to make our distance fog and whatnot. Hopefully it'll load up pretty quick. My dog is making me so very mad right now. Not even gonna lie. Give me just a minute while this loads and does its thing. Out. Okay. Looks like it's frozen. That happens. It's a good thing I have it saved. I don't know why it would freeze now because I have almost everything turned off, but whatever. smell like lake. I was actually in the lake trying to catch fish, which I did, but now I smell like lake mud. I gotta really take a shower. Okay. So we're gonna close Gaia. I don't need that open. I have a lot of stuff for work open still. Holy crap. There we go. By the way, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is probably one of my most favorite games ever. So I've played it a few times and beat it a few times, and I'm really excited for the second one. The second one is going to be amazing, hopefully. As long as they keep modern politics out of it, I don't care. Any game can be made, any movie, show, whatever, it can be made, but if they take an ancient, old society and thrust in modern politics into it, I'm going to be angry. There's not a bigger turnoff in today's day and age than modern things being thrust into older style, like, times. And I apologize if I sound very monotone and tired, because I am mostly monotone, but I am also extremely tired. LV426 100 years later. Nice. Alright. Let's get it loaded again. Boom. Get out of here. Okay, let's try this again. We're going to turn everything off, though. Increase this. Let's see here. We're going to turn everything off except for what we want. And it's going to be, oops, one rock. Turn this volume off. There we go. And a bunch of cameras, too. So we're going to remove this and this one. And oh yeah, just for reference, what I do with this figure, it's just the default figure in here. I don't change any of the parameters. I use that to set the scaling for the camera. So I just put the camera right behind this figure's head at its, right where the eyes would tend to be. That way I can make sure that we're close enough to the ground where the scene looks large enough to match the scaling. That's all I do. In this case, I didn't actually do that entirely with this scene, mostly because of this hill right here. I didn't want that to, oops, come on, there we go. It's being funky. The scene is this slope right here. was too much, and I couldn't get the camera to function right for me. So as you can see here, it's having difficulties. Usually it doesn't, but I wanted this to be center, so I had it here originally, and I had it off, but I didn't like the way that looked. I liked the way this one looked more. It's still at the same height. It's just slightly higher, just a little bit, but not by much. So let's turn the rock assembly on, and let's see if we can take a look at our material, because that's probably what most people are going to be worried about. Oh, Michael R. Yeah, you watched the time lapse at 0.25 speed to see how I textured with Mixer. Did you learn anything from it? Like, did anything not make sense, or did it all make sense, or what? I hope it did. I try to make those things make sense. So the time lapses themselves don't have to make sense. I like doing time lapses because they are fun for me, but I hope you guys enjoy the music that plays in the background. Also, I hope you guys like seeing the outcome of the whole picture at the end. So I really like doing time lapses. They were some of the first things that I ever started doing back in the View days. I did time lapses. So let's turn this off as well. There we go. All right, so let's turn off the medium. We're going to get into this medium in just a bit because that's what's going to give us our distance fog, and that is very important for this scene, is to make sure that we have a nice large scale. So I'm going to go ahead and save real quick in case it freezes again. All right, let's okay. Let's load it up. And in Octane, I am using path tracing. So I don't know what you guys are using. If you're using Redshift, then you're gonna want to use something similar to this. I used Redshift a long time ago. I alpha and beta tested it, actually, back before they even required a payment for it. But that quickly changed after it came out of beta. So that was interesting. Come on. Looks like it wants to. Good. All right. So the glares, or the shafts coming off of the mountain right here, they're actually from this HDRI. This HDRI is important. So oh, nice. All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, as long as you are learning, then that's sweet. Hopefully I'm doing my job for you guys and teaching you a few things. So the texture setup here is very basic. Obviously we didn't export anything from Gaia that would give us a bump map. We did export a normal map. I didn't in this breakdown, but I did explain that we do want a normal map, because we do. But in this case, the only normal map that I have applied here is the one from Gaia, and then I have a bump map on top of this, and that's how we're getting this snow, flaky snow and ice look. So this is the rock we have right here. Yes, so the material is right there. All right, and the materials actually don't match quite right here with the dirt and the snow on top of it. So it's okay though, we don't have to worry too much about that, because with our lighting changes it's gonna fit in a little better. Plus, when I have this selected, it kind of gives this outline, and that doesn't look right, so that blends in a little bit more nicely right there, because technically the color is only just white inside of Gaia. So there's that. Let's turn off the composition here real quick, and you can see how that blends really nice with that dirt. Also, yes, I have brought stuff from Gaia into Unreal. I've actually done that quite a bit. Not in the tutorials that I make, or any of these live streams or time lapses, but I do plan on getting into playing with Unreal a little bit more with Gaia, importing my landscapes and whatnot in there. The only problem I have with Unreal is I can't figure out for the life of me good texturing. I get a ton of tiling, and I hate tiling, and I know there's ways to break it up, and I actually have a plugin for Unreal Engine. It's a auto landscape texture or something like that, auto landscape something. But it helps auto texture and populate your landscape with plants and stuff like that, plants and rocks, and it's really cool, but it's not as simple to use as I would like it to be. And I'm just lazy. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm just an extremely lazy person when it comes to Unreal, because I like node graphs, I like using connection points and stuff like that, but when I open up Unreal Engine and I see the verbiage that they have for all of their nodes, none of them make sense in my head. And I've tried and tried and tried, and I don't plan on quitting, but I've tried to understand the meaning and nuances behind their naming structure for their nodes, and it just doesn't make sense. Like, when you talk about like world coordinates and you have to map the world coordinates to your landscape, that's an object coordinate to me. Like, your landscape is the object, not the world, and you have to map it based on the world coordinates, and it just doesn't make sense in my head, and I don't like it. So it's a little bit more cumbersome, and I just can't hop into it and enjoy it the way I would like to. So flipped normals tutorial, that was a guy trained into Unreal, and Unreal's material is yeah, it can be a steep learning curve. To do simple things in Unreal, it takes way too many nodes. It does. Like, texturing inside of Gaia, I know is not the same thing as in Unreal, because in the Unreal Engine, you're not really using a lot of procedural textures. You're probably using like Megascan assets or image files most of the time. But that doesn't mean it should be a big pain in the ass to jump in and say, hey, I want this texture, but I want to apply it at this scale, and I need it to be randomly rotated on different degrees and axes or whatever, to get a non-tiled look, and then have an easy, simple blend between the seams so it is less noticeable. Like, it should be extremely easy, but it takes way too many nodes to do a simple little thing. That's the way I feel in Unreal, and I will be the first one to admit that comes with a lack of experience in the overall Unreal Engine's node system. But I know for a fact that I can use nodes, and I can use them well, because I do it in Octane all the time, and I do it in Gaia and World Machine and Vue and pretty much any other 3D application that I have used. I've always used their node systems, but it just, the naming structure for the nodes in Unreal, just, they don't click in my head the way they should, and it's a huge turnoff for me. I do want to get more into it though. I really do. Like, I've been asked a lot of times if I will get into it, and I do want to, because I shouldn't be using me not knowing how to do it very well as an excuse to not do it. That just gives me more of an excuse to do it. Okay, so as you can see here, we do have the blending with the landscape here and here. The only thing that would be different between the white snow on these rocks as opposed to the snow here is that they don't actually have a bump or a specular or a roughness. And you could do this for all of the nodes in here. So let's do right now I'm doing it just for the albedo. There's our dirt, there's our albedo, and there's our RGB spectrum. And I'm throwing that into a mixed texture, and I'm applying the mixture based on the dirt here. And this is just the dirt node inside of Octane right here. And I'm using these values. I'm using a 5 on the details. You can go a little bit higher if you need more granularity inside of your dirt. And I don't want to break these down too much because a lot of it is just based on what you think looks nice. But the major thing you need to know here is you need to have the details set to what you want them. If they're too low, they're going to look really blurry and blotchy. So if you want it to look more granular, like there's a hard surface that the snow landed on like this, you have to increase the details. And you can go higher than 5, but 5 is just where I went. So And then you can do this for all of your textures here. We can do, let's bring these out, and this mixed texture, and this dirt. And we want to keep this dirt because we don't want to change any of the values for it. And we're going to start with the specular here. And I might be doing this wrong. It wouldn't surprise me because I actually haven't done it with a specular, but it makes sense that you'd be able to. Just so you can get some highlights right here on the rocks. We didn't have those before. Now we do. And you can mix with the white here as well. It shouldn't really make a huge difference, I think, because you're doing it based on this texture and the white. So yeah, there we go. It looks a little bit better, blends a little bit better. And then you can just do this for all of them, and that way you get the proper roughness and specularity on your snow with your dirt. It might not make a huge difference, but it's always worth giving it a good try, in my opinion. Let's just do it one more time with the roughness. We don't want to do it with all of them. So we'll just do that amount with that. And we'll do it with white. There we go. And just to see what happens, if anything, let's just move this over and attach it to the roughness. Yeah, it did a little bit. Not much, just a tiny bit. And if you want to do that with the bump, you can probably do it with the bump, but we're not going to. All right. So the dirt with the mixture in there, all that's doing is applying this white material to the this white substance to the material here on the object, so it looks like snow fell on it, and it helps blend between the landscape. But another thing that you're going to want to turn on, and I was informed of this in the Octane forums or Octane group on Facebook, and I'm not sure if it actually worked the way it was intended to and if I was actually given good information, but I did it anyways, and I'm not dissatisfied. We'll just say that. Either the dirt does well enough to blend between the materials on the landscape and the object here, the rock object, or it's actually doing what it's supposed to. But if you enable round edges, so you check round edges here, and then it'll ask you to generate the round edges, and then all I did is I increased the radius a bit and changed the mode to accurate. I don't know if that actually did what it should have done, because I've actually never used the round edges option in my materials ever. So we can probably play with this and see what happens if we increase that high. Looks like 1 meter is about as large as it's going to get. But apparently what it's supposed to do is help also blend at the seams here, so it doesn't look like there's just a harsh seam between your object material and your landscape material. That's what I told was supposed to happen. But again, I could have been given bad information, but everybody on that in that group seems to know what they're doing almost all the time, and they're all really nice, so I don't think they would ever give me a reason to not think that. I also was told to check consider others. Hold on a sec. My kid got out of the bath. She needs to go brush her teeth. Alright, so I did that with all these materials, by the way, not just this one. Alright, so let's turn on the next rock. Let's see if it'll load. These are large objects. I'm not using any specific LOD here. I'm using the base mesh, so these are all really large. And as you can see here, that's that spire looking one. And I just kind of plugged that down into the landscape as well, so let's go take a look at that. We'll get into this bump a little bit later, because I actually really like the way this turned out. But we'll get into that a little later. Alright, there we go. And as you can see here, the rocks blend really well. It's sticking out of the landscape right here because it actually gets cut off by the camera. So I didn't care about that sticking out. If I was doing an animation, I'd be a little more worried, but I didn't have to worry about that here. And if we zoom in, you can see here we have a seam from our rock, but it's hard to tell. We have our landscape here, it's a little lower resolution, then we have a rock here, but we have a very fine seam that's hard to see from far away. Even up close it's a little bit harder to see, but because of that powder substance that we put on our material, we have a nice simple blend between the object and the landscape. That's always something that I've had issues with in the past, is I would always have this really harsh seam, and I didn't like it, and nobody likes it, nobody wants it, so using the dirt just kind of helps mask that a bit. And the material for it is the exact same thing as the other one, so we don't have to worry about that. This one, on the other hand, is slightly different, but not by much. If you wanted to, you can use the same material, same rock material from these rocks right here for your landscape. And since you're covering up most of the landscape with snow and you only have these slopes, you can actually decrease the tiling for it quite a bit and still have it look pretty good. And then you'll have a rock material that kind of fits these other rocks. But this one right here is the next one we added, and I did the same thing, just added some powder on top of it so it blends in a little bit more nicely. I also need to, I didn't do this in the final render, but it needs to go down just a tad bit and over just a tad bit, about right there. I like that more. So that one right there just kind of adds the middle, or hides the middle ground a bit. And that's all these next couple rocks do. They just hide this middle ground just a tad bit, just so we have it more, so it's coming into our line of view a little bit better, this mountain. Just kind of helps pave the way for it. You know, using your rule of thirds and things like that, you know, your basic photography stuff. That's all you have to really worry about. I also didn't know what I was going to do with this middle ground. It just was flat and bare, and I guess we could have just kept it that way, but I didn't actually like that. I like the rocks being in there, and I just added them in like this. And again, all the materials are the exact same. They are using their own materials when I imported them from Bridge, but I just added the dirt material on top of them the exact same way. So this rock right here I actually put in the far background right here, because that little area right there was sticking out just a bit too much and was not detailed enough. There just was not enough detail in it. So I placed a rock there, and that rock is the exact same one as this rock. So that was very easy to kind of just copy and push into the background and cover that peak. And I just put it right in the peak too, so I moved it around just now from its original spot, but that's okay. And it also gives you a little more highly detailed rocks in the background, so you're not sticking with these flat areas. And then of course the same thing with this one right here. I put a rock in the background there as well to cover up that area. We'll see it come on here soon, hopefully. There we go. So that we just have these more sharp, high polyed rocks in the background. So just using the same assets, just rotating them and moving them around to get a different look is all I'm doing. My kid keeps coming in. I like this one right here because it has this rock fall right here. It looks like the rocks fell, and then they just kind of blend nicely. So okay, so those are the rocks I'm using, and the material setups for them. It's very simple. I don't want this to be a super long live stream that I normally do. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing 6-hour live streams like I have in the past, but whatever. Let's go ahead and start talking about our atmosphere. So we do have a volume here, and this is a VDB that I made in EmberGen, and I'm using it just to kind of give a nice little mist right here in the foreground, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and talk about the daylight. So this is what I'm using. I'm using the Hosek-Wilke daylight model. I find that that one works best for pretty much everything, for I guess more of a realistic light simulation. And it also matches the lighting with this HDRI. So if you have an HDRI that's really yellow and golden, like you have that golden hour look, a Hosek-Wilke model will probably be your best friend. If you use the Octane one, things are a little bit more purple and pink. And that looks okay, but it doesn't blend with some HDRIs very well. And then the Nishida one is a little bit more blue, a little more cooler. It's not going to be so much in this case because we have the light pushed way down, but you actually want to use this when you're higher up in the atmosphere, like a space scene maybe. It's supposed to model that pretty well. But I chose the Hosek-Wilke. It worked pretty well. And I can actually increase the sun here just a bit, just so we can get some extra light coming in. There we go. Not much, just a little bit. And we might change that again. So next thing is, these are the values I used. I increased the sky turbidity to 5, and I found that that looked really good with my fog that I had put in. And I'm also getting ahead of myself. Hold on. So we have this snow material on our landscape. This is the landscape material. That's our texture map we exported from Gaia. I'm just using an image texture here. And if you change this to normal, it'll compute a little bit. It'll default to that, but if it was like a black and white map, you want to change that to float. So something like a specular map or a roughness map, you would want to change the float, or a displacement map. And then there's our normal that we exported from Gaia. And then the bump is actually just this turbulence. The turbulence comes from the Octane turbulence right here. And I increased the octaves to 15 and the omega to 0.9 abouts there. And then I changed the UV transform. I added a UV transform node here, and I decreased the scale to 0.01. And that gave it this more like snow feel here. Now the highlights are a little bit different. So we have these highlights coming off of the snow and hitting us a little bit. That comes from our specular and our roughness, obviously. Our specular's mix is set to 1, so it's using its full mix power. But I'm also just using the same texture map that we used here for our diffuse. And I use a color correction to change it into black and white. It'll be easy to show you here. So there's our diffuse. All I did is I copied the diffuse for the specular and the roughness, and I put them through. Let me move these around. I don't know where that one came from. Hold on. I think that was the original one. There we go. Color correction with the saturation set to 0. Thrown into a mixture. You can see the mixture here. There we go. It goes into the this right here goes into the amount, and then this just goes into texture 1 and 2, and then I put that into specular and roughness, and then that's how we got this like sheen on top of the snow. And then for the roughness, I decreased the mix value down to 0.1, because if it was set to the highest value, it was just a little bit too bland. It was too rough across the entire surface, and it didn't give us good highlights, so I just put it down to 0.1, so it was a little bit more concentrated. Terry, can you put the dogs out, please? I want there to be just a slight bit more highlight in these areas right here. Okay, so that breaks down that, and that was just our bump, a bump in diffuse and roughness. It wasn't a whole lot going on there. So now let's go ahead and get into our medium. That's where a lot of people struggle in Octane, and I did for a really long time too, and I didn't have a good workflow until maybe like a month ago. I was still using like a volume, this volume object right here, and increasing it to the size of the landscape. But I got tired of doing that because, one, it was not very friendly on the system. It was way too expensive to use for everything, especially on larger scenes. So I started just playing around with the medium option inside of the Octane Daylight object, and this actually works pretty well. What you want to do is you want to take the size of your scene. My kid keeps slamming the door, I apologize. And then you want to increase it to about the same size. So our landscape is 20,000 meters. So we want to increase the medium radius to about 20,000 meters. It's very simple. It's that simple, seriously. Let's go ahead and enable the fog medium. And you have to add it if you haven't already. And this is the fog you'll get. Very, very easy and cheap to render fog. That's the important part, is that it's cheap to render. And it just breathes a whole bunch of different life into your scene. It really does. So let's move this sunlight more behind this peak real quick. It's a little bit too bright there. All right. That will be our fog. Now the values we have for the fog go like this. I changed the density all the way down, as far as it can get. I don't know if you can type in a manual variable there to get something less, but I typically get pretty good values just by decreasing it all the way down, so that doesn't really matter. And then the volume step length, I also increase all the way. There is a difference. A lot of people have said in the past that there isn't a difference in the volume step length if you were to decrease it and increase it when you're using the medium option in the daylight tag, but let me show you something. If I didn't increase this and instead I was using a really low value, I get a blackout. Not only that, but if I use the default value of 4, I can't do anything, I can't see anything until I start increasing it. And now we're starting to get something here. We're starting to get something. We have to go really high to actually start getting any kind of visibility in our scene. So if you just want a very easy, simple atmospheric fog, I just increase all the zeros a couple times until they make like 10 billion or something like that, and then it just auto corrects it down to what is it, 100,000. So you can't go higher than 100,000, but in my experience you don't have to go much lower or higher than that, because everything else is going to be based on the phase and the medium radius. Okay, so the absorption and the scattering should be set to RGB spectrum and white. You can play with these to get a different look if you want. They don't have to be white, but if you want there to be just light transmission and absorption, set it to white, because everything else will come from your HDRI and your sunlight and all that stuff. And then your phase is important. If you want your phase, if you want your fog to kind of spread through, the light to spread through the fog, you're going to want to increase it to 0.8. I find that that's a really good value. That's actually what it defaults to, but that's the value that I've almost always used. But if you set it to 0, you get a really interesting like golden hour look, but it might not give you the best fog effect. So you have to play with this and be kind of generous in what you're doing. So if we were to decrease it to negative 0.8, now our light is phasing in the opposite direction, where it's starting to hit the front of our fog, which might give us more of a depth look here, closer to the mountain, and the light's not scattering throughout the entire scene, but it gives you a very dark foreground here, which can give its own cool looking, interesting look and feel. But I mean, it's all preference. If you wanted to have light that reacted naturally and how it should react, you're going to increase this to 0.8 or higher, not much higher than 0.9. So if you go too high, then it doesn't look good at all, in my opinion. Now when you have this all set up and you have the fog you like, you might notice that your sky is getting blown out. We have this HDRI, but now we can't really see it. This is why I had the sunlight slightly below the mountain, like right there, somewhere abouts, because we can start seeing, it's still providing us the light we need to have a good look, but we can start bringing out our HDRI. So right now the sunlight is probably below the horizon right here, but since we're using the Hosek-Wilke model, it's we'll actually be able to get the light from the sun coming through a little bit more. But this HDRI right here provides much of the light that we need for everything else. And you can increase this too. We don't have to have it that low. We can bring it up just a tad bit. All you have to do is, if you increase it here to bring out the sun a little bit more, just go into your tag options and decrease the sun intensity. That way you're not getting blown out. And these values are important. So if we were to decrease the turbidity, we're getting a lot of blowout in the sky here. We don't want that. We want to be able to see our HDRI. So if we increase the turbidity, we'll start getting more of the light, like the Rayleigh effect kicking in, and then we'll start seeing the light kind of spreading across the entire atmosphere here. But 10 is typically pretty good, in my opinion. But as you can see, we lose a lot of the light that hits our snow. And this has its own cool effect. Obviously, there's a setting for any given situation, but it all comes down to what you want. So what I found that worked pretty good was 5 for this particular scene, because what that did is it allowed me to see my HDRI, but it diffused the light just enough where we can still get this like this spectral and roughness lighting hitting off of our material here, but also it's scattered across the atmosphere just a bit. Hold on a sec. So it was a good mixture, and I had to compromise because it was still way too bright in the sky for what I wanted, which I probably could have fixed in post, but I almost never do post. I almost always just export straight out of Octane or out of Cinema 4D. But it worked pretty well because we have our atmosphere fog that gives us this distance that we wanted, but now I can see the light kind of hitting here on the snow, and it's just very minor. It's not too much. So what else can we talk about here? Okay, so let's go back to medium. Say you wanted you had too much and you couldn't find a good way to balance between lighting and this fog. You can decrease the medium. So I have 20,000 right there. We can do like 10,000, and that will decrease the overall amount of fog in your atmosphere. But keep this in mind, if you do that, you're also going to get less atmospheric fog, in that kind of gives you the depth that you want. If that is the case, go into your phase and reduce it. That might help you. You can probably reduce it into the negatives. It really just depends on what values you had set. But for the most part, if you have your radius set to the size of your landscape, roughly, then it should work out. You just want enough of a radius there to fill in your entire scene. So if you have a scene of like 5,000 and you're 5,000 meters by 5,000 meters and your camera is right in the middle of that scene, that should work well for you. But if you're on the very edge of that like object that you're trying to render out, like say you're at the 1 meter mark into your object, you're probably going to want maybe 6,000 meters. So you just cover the landscape a tad bit more on the edges, give or take. It just really depends. There's a lot of things that depend in this situation. Okay, so that is my atmosphere, and it's a very simple atmosphere. It's a very cheap atmosphere to render too. It doesn't take a whole lot. So let's go ahead and talk about our volume here. And this is the one that I had the hardest time with because I exported it out of Embergen, but I just could not find a good placement for it or good values. But then I settled with this, and when I say settle, I really did just settle. Like I was like, screw it, I'm done. I'm not working on it anymore because I'm just wasting time at this point. But as you can see here, it just adds this little bit of fog here. Not much. So let's go ahead and see what we can do to kind of change some of its values. So the step length here is really high, and that's because I need it to be super thin. I need it to be as thin as it can get because I just need it to be a nice little fog, little mist that you can see right through, but it still gets light scattering through it like it's happening right now. If I decrease this, I usually use a value of 500. It's way too much. I couldn't get the lighting to pass through it the way I wanted it to. Not only that, but I couldn't find a good placement for it where it just made sense. So there is our, let's turn off medium there. That is my VDB right there. And it's large and in charge. And I did that intentionally, but I couldn't reduce this enough to where it wasn't taking up the camera. So you can see here. I could always get this one in the background, but then this one would not be encompassed enough, and I needed this to be kind of filled in a bit too. And it's not as simple as just moving it over and then looking, because it's so large. So what I did is I just increase the step length, and what that does is it helps thin it out a bit. And actually this might be a better placement, especially after we start thinning it. So let's go to 5,000. It might be, in this case, might be too much. There we go. That might be alright, because right here we can see this one's just kind of getting hit by it. It's still kind of being affected back there, and this one right here specifically. But let's decrease it. Let's go to 1,000. Let's go to 800. I might have found, after explaining it to you guys, I might have found a better solution. I guess we'll find out. That actually looks probably pretty good. But we also have to turn back on our medium. When you have a medium for your lighting, it can bring out harsh edges in your VDB that you don't want, but in this case it actually looks pretty decent, so this actually might work out. Okay, we're gonna keep this because I actually really like the way that looks. Let's talk about our HDRI. So this is going to be any HDRI that you want to use. I'm not going to get into what I'm using, but essentially you just want to line it up. The sun in the HDRI needs to match the placement of the sun in your scene. And I also just used an image texture. And then I increased the power to 2 and decreased the gamma to 1.2. So if I increase the gamma, that's going to increase the contrast, and that just makes it way too stark. So 2.2 is the default, and this is what we had before. This is what I had when I loaded it in. Obviously that's way too much. That's not what I wanted. That might be what you want. That's not what I want. So I decreased it to 1.2. That just kind of diffuses it a bit. And then if you increase the power, yeah, it actually does the opposite of what you think. So when I increased the power, it actually made it more light rather than extra contrasty as well. So the power was set to 1 by default, as you can see here. Still, again, that's way too much variation, and it looks way too dark. So I increased it to 2, and we can actually probably go to 3 in this case. And that lightens it up quite a bit. And that's about it. I actually like it at 3 more than I did at 2. 2 was still a little bit dark, but 3 looks pretty decent. So that looks good. I like the way that looks. I probably actually made this look better trying to explain it to you guys than when I was setting it up. So there's that. And you can add whatever else you want to this. You can add like a person in there, a little sled, snow team, or something. And just for context, let's move this guy over so you can see the scale, the overall scale of the scene. So we'll move him, I believe, right there's that object. We'll see. I'll add another camera. Oops. Man, it's way too sporadic. There we go. That's because this guy is so small. And the project settings are set to huge. So if we take the project and reduce that to, maybe small, that might work. Oh, come on. Let's go to him. And you can see the guy is super tiny. Like, it's going to be way too hard to line him up for you guys because he's just so small. Anyways, he's a tiny little dude. So that kind of gives you this scale of the scene. So if you were to have like a person in here, you would put him like right here at the peak right here, and he'd just be a tiny guy kind of looking off into the distance. But you want to make sure your scale is correct for all of your objects and your placements. These objects right here, these rock objects, they were all scaled to be large. Their default size was so tiny compared to the size of my landscape that there's no way I would get any amount of good detail out of them. So I increased their scaling like something like 600 or 700 times the size that they were at default. But since they're scattered across the landscape at different intervals and far away from the camera, except for these right here in the front, but these looked okay. Plus I have some blurring, some depth of field occurring right here at the front, so it just kind of blurs in right there. But everything looked fine in my opinion. So in any case, I'm gonna call it good for this live stream. I had a couple people ask me to break this down for them because I didn't want to type it all out. That would have just been a big pain in the butt, and doing a video on it and uploading it, I would just forget to upload it until way later because I have a bunch of other stuff I'm trying to catch up on. So I think a live stream, while it's still fresh in my mind, is a better idea. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you to the ones who did join and put in some comments. Go ahead and join the Discord for anybody who's just watching but not commenting. You don't have to. I'm not going to bite your head off if you join and ask a bunch of questions. It's there for a reason. I want you guys to ask questions so you can learn how to use Gaia and stuff like that. And then hopefully we can start doing more of this stuff. My work schedule has changed. So now I work 3/13s, and I work Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That means I have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday off, which means I can probably do this stuff more often and I can catch up on some requests. But I'm still acclimating to that schedule. So it's going to take me a long time until I get used to it because I acclimate very slowly when it comes to my sleep because I am a night owl. And now I'm working mornings. I work 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. So I'm used to working second and third shifts for pretty much every job I've ever had. So anyways, ouch. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to end the stream now. Go ahead and comment. And you are more than welcome, Tamer. I do try to put in effort and time for you guys. I do this a lot and I enjoy it and I want to do it with you guys more often. So hopefully now we'll be able to do it. So go ahead and comment. If something comes up later in your mind, go ahead and subscribe to. I don't like to peddle subscriptions on YouTube, but it does help if you like and subscribe, because then YouTube will put my stuff out there more and it will help more people, and it's like a community effort just because of the way the algorithm works, and it's a pain in the butt. I get it. So I don't peddle it often, but go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and then we'll call it good. Thank you all. I'll see you guys later.